You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today I'm joined by Katelyn Parsons, entrepreneur, speaker, certified intuitive eating and body image coach, as well as the host of Body Truth with Katelyn Parsons podcast. After years of struggling with bulimia and disordered eating, Katelyn not only found recovery, but recognized a crucial missing link in the wellness industry: empowerment and individual sustainability around health. This inspired her entrepreneurial journey and life mission to shift the conversation toward healing our relationship with food and body. Katelyn has helped countless creative leaders transform their relationship with food and body through an integrative, evidence-based process so that they can move through each day feeling more present, empowered, and comfortable in their skin without worrying about what to eat. Today, Katelyn and I get into all of this. Katelyn walks me through the distinct food story pillars in her own life, her road to recovery from several eating disorders and body image challenges. We talk about the impact of social media and pop culture, diet culture, kids and intuitive eating, my own fat phobia, you name it, we get into it. I mentioned in the intro of episode 16 with Dr. Connaughton that episode was the start of a journey for me. Guess what? You're on the journey with me now. When I think of the Dr. Connaughton show, the emotions I associate with it in terms of my own journey with food and body image are shock, awe, and quite frankly, anger. And today here with Katelyn, I associate this conversation with awareness. You certainly don't need to go pause and listen to the Dr. Connaughton episode before tuning in today, but if you haven't heard it yet, perhaps go back and do so at some point. I know I hear the shifts in my understanding, and like I said, this one's about awareness. So, I start off being really just shocked with Dr. C about what diet culture is and what we do about it. And now that I kind of know what it is, I'm able to go a little deeper with Katelyn. So there's more to come in the outro and in the following episodes, so stay tuned, and here's Katelyn. Hey, Katelyn, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hey, Christy. Thank you for having me. I am so excited to be here.
Yes, and I really appreciate you still being excited given the technical issues that we've just had.
I mean, I don't know if it would be an environment that I am welcome without a technical issue, quite frankly.
Fair enough.
Oh, they seem to follow me everywhere I go.
Oh, it's just so frustrating. But here we are, thankfully. I do want to ask you, I've been thinking about this. I've heard often that, people have a money story, and the more I have these conversations and learn about people such as yourself, I kind of feel like we all have a food story too. And you have some pretty particular pillars going back all the way to when you were a baby. And if you could take me through those pillar moments of your food story that led to where you are now, I would appreciate that.
I 100% agree with you. I think we all have a relationship with food. we all have a relationship with our bodies, just like we have a relationship with our partners, our friends, people in everyday life. And just like how you met those actual human beings, the story leading up to that meeting, your relationship with food has its own story. So totally agree with you. And I think it's so powerful when we get to share our stories. So
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate the question. And yes, so in terms of pillars, you already mentioned it. It's funny because I feel like in podcasts, a lot of times we're like, oh, I don't want to make this too long of a story. And I'm like, my story literally starts at the beginning. Like the beginning of my life. I don't know how to make this long, but I will condense it into pillars, like you said. Um, so at 6 months, when I was a baby, I had a severe allergic reaction to milk. My mom was feeding me yogurt. Obviously, like most moms at that age, she had no idea I was allergic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, had to get rushed to the emergency room and was diagnosed with a milk allergy. And so from that point on, I had to wear a gold bracelet. Obviously, I was very little. I couldn't articulate what was actually going on, and it was a really severe allergy. So I needed to let people know that we needed to be careful, that there wasn't actual milk in products, whether I was at school or a birthday party or somebody's house. So I had to wear a gold bracelet and just get used to showing people my wrist so that they would know exactly what to look for. So I want to share that as my first pillar in my food story, because we are all born intuitive eaters. We are all born with this intuitive relationship with food and this intuitive trust with our bodies, our ability to really trust when we're hungry, when we're full, what type of foods nourish us, what foods we don't like, what foods we do like. You have small kids, Christy. I'm sure that you see this all the time with your babies, this visceral reaction to foods that they like or they don't like, and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot, and just the cues around how they're actually eating. It's this very intuitive relationship. Well, that was stripped away from me with this allergy, essentially, because not only was I automatically put in this primal fear state of having to be hyper vigilant about everything that I was eating, um, I I really couldn't be in tune with my body cues because of that as well. And also the psychological development as well too, which had an impact on that.
Mm-hmm.
So from the beginning, it was a pretty crazy entry point into my relationship with food. Um, and that also placed me in a period of restriction. And it wasn't intentional restriction. It was intentional out of my own safety, but I wasn't restricting because I was trying to manipulate my body. I was trying to keep it safe. Nonetheless, restriction is restriction.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got to be a little bit older, around 7 years old, I got the green light. I was okay to eat um, milk, as a lot of allergies clear up for kids. So it was cool. And I was finally able to eat all of the foods that had seemed really fun. And I was really excited to eat. So the pizza, the ice cream, chocolate, just all of the foods that kids want to eat, that people want to eat in general, that are
Mm-hmm.
really delicious, that I just wasn't able to. And there also weren't a lot of alternatives to those foods back in the day as well either. This was like the late 80s. Um, so yeah, there was that period of restriction, and that restriction really led to what we know is so common with restriction, almost this binge effect, where because I had the freedom to eat all of the foods, I didn't have any restriction on me. I wanted everything. And I also didn't really know how to trust my body to tell me when it was full, when it was satisfied, when it was comfortable through that nourishment. So the signals in my body were kind of a little screwed up from the very beginning. Now, all that to say, I also had a really neutral relationship with my body up until about middle school. I was just excited to eat food, eat a lot of it, even if it meant I was uncomfortably full. I don't ever really remember feeling uncomfortable in my body, or comparing my body before I got into middle school. The next pillar to this story is actually having my own body awareness moment. So going into middle school, recognizing that I was um, a little bit different in terms of the sizing from some of my friends. We were shopping in the junior section now. It was a really big deal. There was a lot of change going on in middle school,
Mm-hmm.
obviously.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your hormones are changing, your environment is changing. There's a lot of unknown. There's this added pressure. A sixth grader is very different from an eighth grader. So, you know, change is one of the quickest ways to kind of exacerbate a disorder with our relationships with food and our bodies, because it's something that we feel like we can control. And in that case, I kind of went all in on that. I realized I was different. I realized it was something we were talking about at that age. I also was really interested in pop culture, and that was the, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera era, where this one really specific body was on display, um, through all the tabloids, all the shows I was watching. I was getting into acting, I was in gymnastics, I was swimming. So, all of these really aesthetic sports where I felt like I had to achieve a certain body standard to perform well in the activities that I
Mm-hmm.
had just mentioned. So at that point, I started restricting food and really paying attention to my body, and really getting into some pretty intense disordered behaviors in how I was manipulating my body. I mean, it was really obsessive, to the point where I was measuring, weighing all the time, keeping track in a journal, over exercising, under eating. Was never diagnosed with anorexia. At this point, I would absolutely give myself that diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Anorexia goes under the radar a lot. Eating disorders go under the radar a lot. So, going through middle school, in this intense restriction phase, I had a backlash. Once again, there's a pattern here. When I was going into high school, and I ended up binging, and just could not take that amount of restriction anymore. And so, finally said screw it and started just binge eating, which led to bulimia because of the intense shame that I felt around the volume of food that I was eating, and the secrecy of that, and then not, the intense fear that came with that, in wanting to um, control my body, and the fear of my body changing with the amount of food that I was eating, and also the discomfort that I was experiencing through the binges. And I had no idea why I was binging either, which I'm sure we'll get to later in this conversation, but it just felt really out of control, really chaotic. I was, um, I was always like the healthy eater in middle school too.
Mm-hmm.
So it felt really confusing, really shameful. And when I started purging, it felt like a drug. It felt incredibly euphoric. It was this huge dopamine hit. I felt like I had a secret where I could eat whatever I wanted and keep my body a certain way. Um, I never told anyone about it. And I did this dance with bulimia and intense bouts of restriction all throughout high school. And really, that led into college. Once again, there was a lot of unknowns going into college. There was a lot of change. There was a lot of insecurity. There was a lot of feelings of not being enough, not being good enough. I'm very public about my journey with perfectionism, which is, I like to coin my own journey as accidental perfectionist, because I would have never thought that I was a perfectionist really up until a couple of years ago. But it was um, this way of showing up where I wanted to please everybody else around me enough, and make everybody think that everything was going well in my life, so that I didn't have to confront the discomfort of other people's emotions. I didn't have to deal with um, discomfort of my own emotions to a certain extent as well too. So a lot of emotional avoidance as well. Um, and then getting into college, it just really exacerbated. I mean, I really think that was the lowest part of my bulimia, especially being in an environment where it was really autonomous. I lived with three other girls who were all friends off campus. They were older than me, so I kind of just would hole up in my room and binge and purge all day. Truthfully, it was pretty dark. And I was also involved in Model UN. I was speaking at conferences. I was double majoring in political science and anthropology and minoring in women's studies at that point. Like I was working two jobs. Do you see a pattern here? I was overachieving. I had way too much on my plate, and I didn't have an outlet for how to actually control that, as well as this cycle that I was in where I was over exercising, under eating all day, and then using that outlet that I needed and the hunger that I was feeling to binge and then purge at the end of the day as well too. So that honestly, that was another pillar. Coming out with my eating disorder in college was another pillar. I was adamant about not leaving school. So I got support while I was in school. In hindsight, I don't think that was the best idea. It was what I was set on doing at the time. So I saw a therapist who specialized in eating disorders who helped me the best that she could. Things got a little bit better, but once again, I kind of did this dance all through college into my career. And moving out of college, I moved to Philadelphia, started a career in fashion at that point in my life, and once again was just in this next phase of life where I was feeling all of this intense pressure, didn't have an outlet for how to process the emotions that I was feeling. Once again, was under eating, just restricting intensely without really realizing it. I was all in the name of health. I was always the healthy eater, like I had mentioned before. Nobody ever thought I had a problem. They just thought that I ate salads every day, and it was like the thing to aspire to. And behind the scenes, I was really on this hamster wheel, trying to eat the quote unquote right thing, not ever eating enough, not being able to feel in touch with my body cues and trust my body's wisdom to tell me when it was hungry, when it needed food, when it had enough food, what foods I liked, what foods I don't like. I was highly absorbed in diet culture and food rules. And, when I mentioned before that in middle school I was following Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera and their diet plans and, just aspiring to have their stomachs or whatnot, that was another pattern through all of these pillars as well too. It would be anything from, God, like Jillian Michaels' podcast when I was in my early 20s, like just going down rabbit holes with that, to just like health articles and blogs and all of these just diet traps that I was, in my mind at that time, I just thought that it was the healthy thing to do. So kind of fast forwarding from there, I hit another major pillar where I was relapsing into my bulimia, really hit a rock bottom. My teeth were definitely starting to take a toll. My mom's a dental hygienist, and I just knew at that point in my life, something had to change. I was, it was that moment where I was like, this is scary at this point. Like I can actually see this physically now. Who knows what's going on under the hood if this is actually showing up? And I wasn't dumb. I had researched eating disorders and done all of the Googling and freaked myself out enough to know what could possibly happen if I kept this up. And so I called my family again, was really vulnerable about what was going on. It was terrifying, and got some support. I started seeing another eating disorder therapist actively in person, and really making strides to recovery. And at that point, unfortunately, it was probably not the best therapist, y- for what I needed at that time. Um, and I kind of launched into an orthorexic phase where I was using healthy food in an unhealthy way. It was almost using clean eating as a way to heal my disordered eating and my eating disorder, and just had this visceral reaction to all of the information that I was learning about and all of the things that I was discovering about ingredients and our food systems and just all of these things, and was getting so upset and um, very dogmatic, and once again like very controlling about what I was eating and how I was controlling my body around that. But I wasn't binging and purging anymore, so it was okay in my mind. um, so that's another pillar. And then fast forward, because I was in that highly orthorexic state, I thought, well, why don't I make a career out of this? Because I'm spending all day researching this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't I actually um, shift my career so that I can uh, like make a living off of this? So I got my holistic health coaching certification. It was a 1 year program. So um, there was a lot of time and energy spent in that. And I started coaching clients through that program, and essentially opened up a holistic health coaching business. And I I was never the type of coach that was prescribing weight loss. I was really adamant about that. It was always your relationship with food, but I had such a disordered relationship with my own relationship with food was so disordered at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I couldn't see the forest through the trees. I was so adamant about loving on my clients. I really couldn't see what was going on for me. And I didn't have any support of my own at that time. I was still binge eating. This was, I mean, I was, Christy, I was 30 years old at this point. I think from the time I was 13 until I was 30, I was binge eating. And
Wow.
I had no idea why. I would Google it all the time. I felt like I was broken. I I was so used to it also. It felt so normal for me. I remember thinking, I don't even know what it feels like to not be this uncomfortably full.
Mm.
Like I
Yeah.
can't imagine living life where you're just not uncomfortably full after like the last meal of the day, because I could go, I was a kind of a pro at restricting throughout the day, but the last meal, that was why. And so I was really frustrated. I was also struggling with some anxiety and just really feeling out of alignment with how I was showing up with clients. And I had another rock bottom moment where I just knew I needed to be really honest with what I was struggling with at that time, and found some great support. I live in San Diego now, and found an amazing therapist out here, and I still work with her to this day. She's fabulous. And I really started exploring my relationship with food and the reasons why I was binging. And at that point, I had really made it a point to do the research that I wanted to for so long around intuitive eating, because I had read the book before, I had listened to podcasts on it. I was so triggered by it. I thought it
Mm-hmm.
went against everything that I believed in. I thought it was the thing that was going to break the movement of what we were trying to change in health. And it was just so, I was so mad, but at the same time, I couldn't stop listening to it. And when I finally went through my own healing, I went back, reread the book, really started to do some of the research, because it's an evidence based approach to healing your relationship with food. And I realized, oh my God, there's a reason why I'm resisting this. Like, this makes sense. This is bumping up against every single diet culture belief that I am so deeply attached to right now. Um, and ultimately, that led to a huge transition in my business. And so I went back and got my intuitive eating certification, my body image certification, and also some other just eating disorder certifications from there to really be able to support clients while I continue to do my own work. And I'm really adamant about acknowledging we're all on a journey. We're all on our own food journey, body image journey. It's not something that stops. Very counter to what diet culture teaches us. It's not linear. There's not a black and a white where it's all or nothing. It's very spirally with lots of
Mhm.
highs and lows and shades of grays. And the biggest part of the process is really learning how to um, step into the fear, sit in the discomfort, be in the shade of gray, look for the colors in a situation versus the black and white. And one of the biggest light bulb moments for me during, like, through this whole story, the biggest question that I had was, why am I always binging? And it's because restriction leads to binging.
Mm.
And restriction is not just physical. Restriction is physical, it's mental, it's emotional. It's something that we're not talking about nearly enough
Mhm.
as a culture. Um, and, when I really started researching that and understanding that and also healing that for myself, I just thought, wow, this is this is crazy. There are so many people who are struggling, myself included, for so many years. And if we can just start talking about this more and healing collectively, can you imagine how our culture would change? So yes, 24 minutes. That's my story. And I'll see you next time.
Well, I had to, I just it's intense. It's emotional, and I really appreciate the fact that you acknowledge how far back it goes, because I think that that's also not talked about enough, that intentionally or unintentionally we're being taught and we're sent messages about food before we even realize what's happening. And I think what I want to go back and then and then bring it, more to your work now, and helping, someone like me right now. But I also, being a mom, I can't help but wonder, you know, yeah, like it's such a sticky place to be as a parent, with food, and knowing what we, almost looking past our own beliefs about food and trying to, like, I'll just speak for myself. I'm just trying not to have my kids have that feeling of a restrictive relationship with food, in terms of wanting them to eat quote unquote healthier foods, but also, not wanting them to eat 4 donuts in a day, So it's just, I don't know. It's hard. I don't know if you have any immediate thoughts to that, because I have more, but it's just so
Yes,
hard to know what to do. I don't know.
it's hard. It's hard, Christy, and it requires a massive dose of self-compassion
Mm.
and validation, like self-validation. It is really hard because it's not just about you anymore. It's about your babies that you're
Yeah.
showing up for. Now, I'm not a mom, so I can't speak in that sense,
Mm.
but I do know, just from clients that I've coached in the past, people in my community, I really get the challenge. And one of the best ways that we can address what you're speaking to is by healing ourselves, healing
Yeah.
our own relationship with food and our bodies, so that we can really be an authentic role model for the kids in our life that we're raising, whether it's our own children or the children around us, whether it's nieces or nephews or um, godchildren, people that you, uh, if you're in a profession where you just have kids around you, being that role model, really doing the work to um, heal that for yourself. That is going to be the thing that makes all of these questions so much easier to answer, because they are so authentic for you. And what's so interesting about what you mentioned about how do I get to this place where we have healthy, healthy foods and not wanting 4 donuts every day. So this is where we get to redefine what healthy foods are
Hmm.
and really dismantle some of these beliefs that we've been taught by our culture around what healthy foods are, and really make that empowering decision for yourself. And what's so cool about having kids is you get to not only explore this for yourself, but you're watching intuitive eaters right in front of you. This is where you get to ask them, how do you feel? How do you feel eating a cookie? How do you feel eating a carrot? How do you feel eating a bowl of pasta? How do you feel eating um, or drinking this smoothie? Just how does it make you feel? The taste, the texture, all of the senses, bringing it in. And how do you feel afterwards, too?
Yeah.
Do you have a stomach ache? Are you hungry an hour later? Are you able to go until the next meal and feel really energized? What, just really getting in tune with that, because health is not it's not black and white. It's not these are the foods that fit into this box, these are the foods that don't. But unfortunately, we live in a culture that teaches us that.
Yeah.
And the reason why I know so many parents especially are like, how do I get my kids to not want 4 donuts? It's to neutralize the donuts. It when we keep foods off limits, for ourselves and for the people around us, we want them more because the
Mm-hmm.
desire factor is so high. When they're around us, the novelty wears off, and that's where we really get to approach food from a neutral perspective and a nourishing perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's so intense. I know I said that already, but it is. And I also really appreciate I think we're around the same age, and it was one of the things that I wanted to bring up with you about pop culture. I There's a fair amount of chatter across a lot of the social media platforms about what millennials have in their minds as the standard of beauty based on
Mm.
who we idolized as kids versus what is idolized today. And don't get me wrong, we still have a long way to go. But when you look back at the magazine covers that were popular and present while we were young, I mean, it's rail thin
Hmm.
actors, actresses, singers, and a lot of them even now have come out and said, "Yeah, I wasn't in a good spot. I wasn't healthy. I was sick. I was very sick." And that's even the style of clothing people have touched on, like the crop tops and the super 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 low rise jeans and just stomachs exposed, and it was only okay if you had 0% body fat. And I have to say it, when you look at it that way, it's like, gosh, yeah, like as a young tween or teen, your brain is actively developing and changing. And like, those are the images that were burned in my brain for so long. And now,
Absolutely.
yeah, and now I see, the next generation. Like, I was recently shopping for the first time in so long, and there was just groups and girls walking by, and I was just in awe of them and how just, I mean, obviously I don't know, but they just were so freely wearing whatever they wanted, all different shapes and sizes, and it was so refreshing on one hand, and on the other hand I was like, wow, here you are 30 in your 30s, like still trying to work through and get to the point that thankfully at least some of these girls at a much younger age seem to have a handle on. I don't know.
Hmm. Yes, it's a lot to unpack, and you're spot on. We learned this at a highly impressionable age. So these beliefs are deep, and they're also generational as well too. Because think about our own moms or women in our life growing up that we were surrounded by. who were they watching? Who were they influenced by? What was the body standard for them? Our grandmothers, our great grandmothers. This has gone on and on and on. It's super insidious. And, there's a reason why this comes up too. When we are focused on our bodies, we're not focused on how we can show up and make a change as women. It's a really tactful way for us to stay really small as women and not cause any ripples or any waves, socially, politically, all of these really important parts of our society.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a really big important topic, and I'm with you. I'm so excited to see more body diversity in this next generation. I also think that it's really interesting on the spectrum that it's showing up on, because yes, there is one camp where there's a huge array of body diversity, which is wonderful. They also have social media, which
Yeah.
is highly drives comparison, all of these filters that kids are exposed to, and also the idols that they're watching. There's the body type has morphed to this, kind of Kardashian-esque figure, which is also incredibly unattainable.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting ads for these teas and like tea detoxes and
Mm-hmm.
waist trainers, that this is kind of like going out of fashion, thank God, at this point. But
Mm-hmm.
um, nonetheless, this generation has still been exposed to that, where they're being imprinted with these messages as well. And so, diet culture is a $72 billion industry.
Jesus.
It is it is yeah, it's a money making industry that it preys on us. And so it shows up in a lot of different ways, because it sells, because it makes money,
Yeah.
whether it's partnering with influencers, whether it's selling products, whether it's hiring actors or producers to create certain body standards. Like it's everywhere. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And when we can start dismantling it and really identifying uh the diet culture that has really made an impression in our own life and where it's present today, that's when it gets super powerful, and we can really start to unpack in healing, sustainable ways for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what? As you were talking to, I was thinking about, you know, yeah, like how impressionable um we are. I'm still in the kid phase of your journey here. So how impressionable we are at that age. And I made a note when you were talking about, being involved in gymnastics and swimming, and um I'm just thinking about it. Like I did gymnastics and dance, and I can look at pictures of myself when I was, I don't know, 6 years old, even younger, and remember that I felt fat because
Hmm.
the girls around me were smaller. And like, is that something that you think we'll get away from, or is that just a natural human tendency to compare and go, oh, I'm bigger? I mean, because I don't, because how could I have even had that thought at 5 or 6 or 4 even, I don't know. It's really, I don't know. What do you think about that?
I was just going to say that I think that's the question to ask. Why did you have that thought? Where did that question come from? What was influencing you to even come up with that question for yourself at that time? And I'm sure it was a plethora of different things, but nonetheless, it's the culture, it's the diet culture, whether it's things that your mom was saying, or any, parental figure in your life, authority figure in your life might have been saying, what you were watching on TV. Like, this is
Yeah,
everywhere.
it is.
I'm a
Yeah.
big fiction reader. I
Mm-hmm.
love reading novels, especially in the pandemic. And I can't believe, like, it is rare when I get through a novel and I don't find some type of just really disordered way of describing bodies or our relationship with our bodies,
Yeah.
and just things like this. And I also think that it, you know, if we're talking about the fear of being bigger, that really goes into the conversation of fat phobia, which is also taught from a really young age as well too. This shows up in cartoons that kids watch. This shows up, in terms of messaging that they're hearing from some of the places that we just discussed.
Mm-hmm.
It does start from a young age, and so 6 years old is actually not that uncommon, unfortunately. That's kind of becoming the norm. I'm not sure on the statistic of that right now, but I remember being shocked when I heard what the percentage was of just uh, children's body awareness at moments and when they started really feeling other in their bodies.
Yeah. And I'm getting emotional thinking about being in that gymnastics environment. There were times where over the summer we would train for long enough that we needed to eat dinner there.
Mm.
And even at that age, it was like watching how much were other people eating in comparison to how much I was eating, and being aware to maybe not finish everything that was sent for me to eat. And God, that just breaks my heart. Like, I'm picturing my younger self just sitting at that table in, like we ate, all the girls of every age ate together, so it was a little like, oh, we're with the big girls, and feeling a little intimidated by that situation, but also feeling like just this intense pressure to be mindful already at that age of what I was eating.
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah,
gosh.
I'm giving you a big virtual hug right now. It is intense, and it goes back to, like, you were 6 years old. This is when you started living in the shoulds. This is when that disruption in self-trust kicks off, and this isn't just you. We're just talking about your
Right.
story. Like, this is so normal, unfortunately, and especially with females,
Yeah.
to start living life based on what we should be doing
Yeah.
by looking at what everyone else is doing
Mm-hmm.
versus what we want to be doing, what feels right for us, and trusting our bodies in that sense, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Do you see, like, 6 years old, you started doing that, and you're sitting here questioning in your 30s, why is this still an issue? Because it's almost 30 years of this type of messaging. I hear this all the time with clients, and I went through this too. I still have moments where I go through this, but these points of frustration where it's like, oh, I just want it to be over. Yeah, you get to feel frustrated. You get to feel angry. You get to feel the grief. It's actually a really healthy part of the process. And there's a reason why it's coming up, because we're dismantling and unpacking all of these years of messaging and beliefs that have been formed, and um, habits that have been built, and distrust that's been cultivated.
Yeah.
So, yeah, getting mad, feeling the grief, feeling the emotions, super healthy part of the process.
Yeah. And I'll just get this one last piece off my chest now that I've
Yeah.
started this therapy session with you, Caitlin. But I also remember, and mind you, by any standards, I was not overweight. But I remember noticing outside of my leotard that on, like, under my butt, I had just like this line where there would seemingly be like a roll that some girls didn't have. And I
Mm,
was obsessed with always pulling my leotard down over that crease mark. And
mm,
like to the point where, like, mid routine, and gymnastics, you're not supposed to touch anything that you're not supposed to be touching, and like I would be in panic mode mid routine if I felt like too much of my butt and that roll had been exposed. God, I was so young. Jeez,
I,
God.
I so relate to that, Christy. So relate to that.
Yeah.
With me, it was always like the extra skin by my armpits and
Oh,
just
that
feeling
too. Oh my
super,
God. Ugh.
super self-conscious. Where did I learn that from? Like it's I was also 6 years old, and I remember standing in front of the mirror just being like, how can I cover this up when I'm moving around in my leotard or my swimsuit?
Yes. Like, and we all have that. Like, I don't
Mhm.
understand.
Mhm.
Ugh.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I know. It's a part of our body. It's
Yes.
like it's a very natural part of our bodies.
All right. So moving forward in your timeline, um, a little bit about college, and you described it as a pretty dark time, holding up in your room. I'm thinking about maybe women listening who have college stage kids or are girls getting ready to go into college. Like, in your experience, was there anything that anyone could have noticed, would have noticed, could have said? I mean, I think I already know a little bit of that answer, but I'm just wondering if there are things that might be tells or signs to look for if someone's really struggling with a disordered eating or an eating disorder.
God, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is I was very good at keeping it a secret.
I hear that a
Like
lot.
very good. And it's very common with eating disorders. I was also in a pretty normal sized body.
Mm.
So there was no reason to like highly speculate. Um, and at that point, with my teeth and everything, it really hadn't started to erode my enamel. Like I was really getting by pretty easily. But here's where I think we can all do our part for our babies and the generations below us, and also our friends and just community right here right now, is to do our own work around
Mhm.
healing our relationships with our bodies and our relationships with food, and really making sure that we're prioritizing um, a really healed relationship with that, even if we don't think that there is an issue, to get curious, to really examine it for yourself. And I say that because, like we've been talking about, we've all been brought up in diet culture.
Yeah.
Whether you think you have an issue or you don't, it's showing up somewhere, I
Hmm.
promise. So where is there an opportunity to unpack some of the beliefs for yourself? Whether, and it's so nuanced too, Christy. It's how we reference other bodies. It's how we talk about our own bodies. It's really subtle. And especially as moms, how we're talking about our own bodies and other people's bodies, and what we're eating, and really, the how we're labeling food, and how we're creating values around food, and morality or moral hierarchy around foods that are good or bad. um, and this is super common, right? So
Hmm.
even if you have a quote unquote pretty healthy relationship with food and your body, is there still some diet culture that's lingering around, that's really showing up, that for you might feel pretty normal because we live in a culture that's normalized it, but for somebody who's struggling might feel highly triggering or really sensitive? And that's our part, to start dismantling for ourselves so that we can really create a safe space for everybody to heal together. And in hindsight, that's really the only thing that I could have seen shifting, just my own family becoming more aware of it. We also didn't really have the language for it back then.
Yeah.
I mean, diet culture, that was not a term
Right.
back in
Right.
when I was going to college. I think if anybody would have said that to my family, they would have been like, "What? Like what is that?" I so that's just where we are today, though. And so for anybody who's listening, who, you like you're stating in the question, if they have kids that are going off to college, what can they do? Like, this is the work. Like, it starts
Yeah.
with you. It starts with ourselves, and then we show up for the people around us.
Yeah.
And we hold the space. We create the safe space and it's less triggering once we've done the work for ourselves, because very often it's hard to have these conversations if we still have work that we're feeling insecure about. But when we start to do the work, that facilitates the safety to have conversations that are really important, to have these really important check-in moments, and um, the safety for our kids to know, hey, you can come here. Like, it is totally fine to share just as you are, and you're you're loved and accepted as is.
Yeah. Do you think that it's just a generally, it should just be the general new standard that we just kind of really shouldn't talk about each other's bodies? Like, I don't know where that line is. On one hand, I think it's so important that we have conversations about this topic, but the more I learn about it, the more, and you said it, the more I realize how subtly, sometimes like subconsciously, people are not subconsciously, but indirectly sometimes saying things to other people, or saying things about themselves or to other people about body image, whether it's their own or someone else's, that could be triggering or could be harmful. And like, so do we talk about it or do we not talk about it? I don't know.
I I love this question. I think this is one of the best entry points into making a collective change in our culture, to not comment on other people's bodies. It's not your business. It's not our business. And just like you said, it's so subtle, and it's become so normal that it's kind of hard to recognize sometimes. But like, let's just take a step back, and how are we talking about our own bodies in terms of the uh our friendships and our circles that we're running with? Where is that coming from in terms of the community and the connection, and also kind of like this mean girls aspect of like, oh, I hate this and I hate that, and like we bond over how much we hate our bodies.
Yeah.
And also talking about other people's bodies. It doesn't matter if it's the friend that you're pissed off at, or the person, the influencer on your Instagram feed, or the person on the cover of People magazine. It's not your business.
Mm.
So let's shut it down and have some respect for each other.
Yes.
And also, in terms of where we're going with the direction of this conversation too, I really see this manifesting into not just the size and shape of our bodies, but the the way that the anti-aging culture is really taking
Mm.
a hold of diet culture now too. So now it's like the wrinkles in my skin, the way my hair is changing, whether it's thinning out or graying, or the bald spots, or um, just different ways, the sunspots, or how we're aging,
Mm-hmm.
being really ridiculed in our social circles as well too, whether
Yeah.
it's our on our own bodies or on commentary that we're giving for somebody else's. It's just time to change the conversation. We have so many other things we can talk about, especially as women. Men do not sit around talking about their bodies, I promise.
No. No, they sit around talking about ours.
Which is a whole other
I
podcast.
know. Well, it's funny. I had a conversation earlier today with Dina Panza. Um she's a therapist, she's a yoga teacher, and a lot of the conversation kept coming back to very similarly to how this one is, how we start to make any sort of societal change is really by doing our own work. And I think that it's so important with everything you were saying, and just changing the conversation. And I lost my train of thought for a second there, but I got it back. What I what I realized, and where we kind of came to in that conversation, was the more kind of inner work, self-reflection, like that deep unpacking that you're talking about, that we do, you really just get to this place where individually you don't care as much about what the men might be saying about your body, or you don't care as much about what your friends might be thinking if you order a plate of nachos at dinner instead of a salad, and how freeing that is. And it's really just hitting me now, kind of the coming together of both of these conversations that I've had today, that yeah, because if I start to just myself not put all this judgment on myself, put judgment onto others, because I'll be honest, I've done that, I've done the whole, well, she just told me she wants to work out more and lose weight for this event we have, and now she's ordering that. I've done that. And if just one person can stop, and like you said, I just love your whole energy behind that last statement, like, just stop. Like, there's much better things that we can be talking about and focusing on, and me as one person, you as another, and let's just keep it going one by one. We'll just keep changing the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also what you're speaking to, Christy, is so important. It's a matter of deciding. When you
Yeah.
decide for yourself, when you have that rock solid inner confidence, no matter what it is about, it doesn't matter what other people think. You've
Yeah.
decided for yourself.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like if you you love your babies more than anything, I'm sure,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
If you've decided that, you've made that decision. So if anybody else were to come up to you and be like, "Oh God, like her kids are not really that great," you'd be like, um, "Screw you," and I
Lose my mind.
don't care. Like
Yeah.
they are my
Yeah.
babies,
Yeah. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have to have we have to have that we have to have that profound
Mm. Yeah.
just conviction with ourselves
Yeah.
and loyalty to ourselves.
Yeah.
We owe it to ourselves.
Yeah.
It's not just about feeling that way for other people around us or other things. I see this a lot with jobs where um, there's obviously the imposter syndrome and this insecurity with lots of jobs, but also there's a lot of the opposite where we put way too much value into jobs and this unshakable value. We need to have that unshakable value with ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and self-loyalty.
Yeah. It's funny that you used, my babies as a way to describe that, because I read this book not too long ago called Burnout. There's something about,
Oh yeah.
yeah, you've read this, and she talks, well, there's two sisters wrote it. They actually talk about what would it be like if you treated your body like you would treat your newborn, and when you're feeling uncomfortable, rather than shaming yourself or talking negatively to yourself, do what you would do for your newborn and say, are you hungry? Are you tired? Do you need a change of environment? Are you lonely?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny that you use that exact way to say, to make your point, because it's one of those things now. It's like, okay, I've heard this twice now. I'm probably going to now hear it, that law of attraction. I'm probably going to now hear it 3, 4 more times over the next few weeks, that, you start to go,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Well, I also think that we feel like things need to be really complicated, especially as like uh I don't know, intelligent, successful women. We're like, well, it has to be harder than this. I probably should go back to school for this, or I should probably do this or that.
Yes.
It really, like, we get really triggered by simple things in our life. Like
Mm-hmm.
when I have compassion talks with clients at first, it's like, what? You want me to like calm myself down and just like check in and say like, hey, like say to yourself, it's okay to feel this way,
Mm-hmm.
like you would comfort a friend. That's so basic and so simple.
Yeah.
But it's also incredibly difficult, but we're resistant to it at first because it's doesn't seem like the most challenging thing.
Yeah.
Let it be easy.
Right. Well, and it's also, and yes, I'm going to say the same thing you're saying, but differently. It seems easy to the point where it couldn't possibly work.
Yes,
You know,
exactly. Oh my
yeah,
God.
like,
Yes, you probably said it better.
it's like I'm thinking of how, one of the first things that anyone recommends for someone who's feeling anxiety or just discomfort is, to start with your breath, breathe, and you're like, well, what is breathing gonna do? But it's like, have you actually tried it? I'm still working
Yes.
on that, but yeah, it just seems like so simple to the point of like, well, if I couldn't have figured out that simple thing, then it must not work.
Yeah, it's that limiting belief of uh,
Yes.
success equals struggle.
Yes. 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 Okay. All right. So, all right. So, what is your definition of intuitive eating?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked this question because I was hoping you would. And there's just been this huge debate online and people getting really triggered about this. And I am about to write some content around this and really speak up about it. But there is a big difference between eating intuitively and intuitive eating.
Really?
In Yes, intuitive eating is an actual evidence based approach to healing your relationship with food. It was founded by two incredible dietitians, Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch. It's based on 10 principles that really guide you to heal your relationship with food. And it really encourages attunement. So rebuilding that trust with your body, getting back in touch with your body cues, dismantling diet culture, and really embracing satisfaction and the nuances of your own relationship with food that are empowering for you.
Mm.
So listening to your body, trusting your body, letting go of the shoulds, actually figuring out how to eat based on what you need, what's nourishing for you, what feels good, not what someone else is telling you to do or a belief that we hold on to. It's a massive like we've been saying, it really is a massive overhaul of untangling and unraveling all of these beliefs that we have around food in our bodies and rebuilding new nourishing ones that are really that are right for us. Eating intuitively is is just that's what happens when we go through the intuitive eating process. We get to eat intuitively. We get to really trust our hunger and our fullness and our satisfaction. We get to really um, eat things from a place of what feels good and really check in with what we need based on a couple of different things actually. Energy, like what we know about how food makes us feel and what type of food we need based on what kind of day we're having. Whether you're back to back with meetings, whether you're sick, whether you are running a bunch of errands, whether you're just like having a pretty normal day, like what type of food tastes good, is going to feel good for you physically, mentally, emotionally, all of these things. That is eating intuitively. It's really hard to eat intuitively when you're caught up in diet culture though. There has to be that dismantling. And
Mm.
so often the conversation that I've been hearing recently is a lot of people saying it's impossible to eat intuitively in the food system that we're in right now because it makes it impossible with all of these sneaky additives that get pushed into products and dysregulate our body chemistry and all of these things. I used to I used to uh, die on this hill with my business. Like this was my message. I said it loud and proud. This was in that pillar of being super triggered by intuitive eating.
Mm.
And it's because I was caught up in diet culture to actually learn about what it meant to go through the intuitive eating process. That would mean that I had to untangle all of the things that were keeping me safe at that
Yeah.
point, all of the beliefs that I was holding around food in my body at that point, all of the diet culture messaging that I was really ingrained in the name of wellness and the wellness culture and health. Intuitive eating isn't anti-health. It's not anti-wellness. It's pro-health. It's pro-wellness. It's pro you building trust in your body, but you have to go through the process. You really have to unpack to get to this place.
Hmm.
So, does is that helpful?
Yes.
Anything? that you want me to elaborate on there?
No, that is so helpful for me personally. I feel like I'm in sort of an awareness phase of this, you know, body image, self-talk, and I keep hearing, intuitive eating and eating intuitively kind of thrown around, to be honest, just on social media, on podcasts I listen to. And I think where I can identify that I'm getting stuck is that I I generally feel like I'm good. I'm okay with cues, but I ignore them. And I think
Mm.
what I'm getting out of this, most importantly, is that I really need to go through, like you said, the process on a much deeper level than trying to just piece it together for myself based on what I'm seeing and hearing around me. And I say that with the knowledge that I an hour ago got your hour long video in my inbox, and I was like, okay, there's actual protocol here. There's an actual process. This isn't just like an abstract concept. I haven't watched it yet, so I'm not informed entirely, but it just receiving that in my inbox and then or signing up for it and getting it, and then through this it's clarity for me that even hearing you say it's science based, I just had no idea. And for some reason in my awareness on social media and things, that was not made clear. So I really that's everything for me right now. I really appreciate that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. No, we need to be talking about this more. So I really appreciate the question because this is how we heal. Like this isn't another um just like fad diet that's going to get you the body that you want. This is about rebuilding trust and unpacking, and especially and unfortunately so many of us struggle with disordered eating without even realizing it because it's become so normalized in the culture that we're living in.
Yeah.
And it's been passed down for generation after generation. And Chrissy, what you're describing, I so appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that, where you feel like it's the avoidance of the body cues, where like, oh, I can tell when I'm hungry, I can tell when I'm full, but I'm just avoiding them.
Mm-hmm.
Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, and I have one more I'll share with you when you're done.
Okay, cool. Yeah, this is super normal, first of all. And the thing that always stands out to me when I hear this and when I went through this myself is there is some restriction going on around there.
Yeah.
Mental restriction, physical restriction, emotional restriction. There's some fear that is causing you to avoid the cues. And it's almost so this, I'm going to get super deep for a moment, and this
Mm-hmm.
could probably be another podcast, but it's almost always related to our internalized fat phobia.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that we have to unpack in the process as well too. Why do we have this intense fear of our bodies changing? What does that mean when our bodies change? What are we really trying to avoid, and how can we unpack that uh, and and really destigmatize this as well too? Because this is where we really start to talk about health at every size, and
Mm-hmm.
health at every size collectively as well. So there's a lot there. Like, this is a pretty deep process. So no, it's not just like the eat whatever you want whenever you want it. I'm so not on board with that. Like,
Yeah. All
that
right.
is not intuitive eating.
Okay. Okay. No, it's good to hear though, because I think initially when I heard intuitive eating, I think of, just very simply put, you know, only eat when you're hungry, or like kind of, or yeah, or like exactly what I just said, listening to the cues. And then I'm going, well, why am I not paying attention? Like, I'll reverse it, pay attention to the cues, and then it's like, well, why am I not actually listening to them? And as you were talking about restriction, I mean, that's certainly something else, and I can identify. It's like I'm not sure when the next time is that, not that I will get the food, but that I'll allow myself to have it. So just let's use pizza as an example. My husband and I want to order pizza, and I'm getting through this. I'm not as I'm getting through it, okay, but it's still a process because it's like that feeling of, okay, after a slice, maybe two, depending on where it's from, I'm probably done. But I have that innate sense of, well, I've allowed myself to have it tonight, so I need to fully take advantage of it. And that's when I get uncomfortable. And that then starts the whole cycle of, you're such a jerk. You weren't hungry. You just overate. You just like ruined it all. And it's sad. It's terrible.
Well, it is. And it's also the mental restriction.
Yeah.
I'm only allowing myself to have this right here and right now. It's either all now or nothing at all.
Yeah.
And I don't know when the next time I'm going to give myself permission to eat pizza. So I better get it in now.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to run the risk of that deprivation, which is that also kicks in that primal survival cue.
Right.
Like there's a reason on a biological level why this happens, that you are not crazy. And yes, it does also bring in these really intense emotions as a backlash as well too. The shame, the sadness, just the insecurity that you're describing that we all face when we do this. Super normal. And it's really unfortunate too. And yes, to your point, it has definitely become the hunger fullness diet for some reason. I guess because if anybody is trying to sell intuitive eating as a weight loss program, run. And I'm getting that information directly from the creators of intuitive eating who I've done my training with. It's just really not designed to be like that. It really is designed to heal our relationships with food and our bodies.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and I think you had a great point, and I made a note with some big stars for myself about my own internalized fat phobia, because as I mentioned, I'm still working through it, and I know I am because there's this thought in the back of my head that it's almost like I hope that in letting go of some of the intense mental restriction and releasing myself of that overly negative self-talk, it's almost like I'm doing it still. I'm trying to do those things still so that perhaps my physical body will let go of the stress of all of that to eventually allow me to lose weight. Like, does that make sense? Like, I'm literally hoping that I can be nicer to myself and more understanding and more compassionate, so that the end result is that my physical body gets the message that I'm not stressed about this anymore, so that then it will start to just like shed pounds, as if that happens that way.
Yeah, it's super normal. I mean, I really want to validate what you're saying. It's this is something that I hear all of the time. And I also, like, I can speak to my own lived experience with this as well too. Like this desire to, this fantasy that we have almost of, when I heal, that's when I'll really achieve like the body that I want.
Yeah.
And it really, one of the things that we have to really keep in mind through this process first, I think it's essential, at least the way that I coach, is we have to put that fantasy of weight loss on the back burner and give ourselves the space to really let our bodies do its thing and gravitate towards a natural set point weight. And when we heal the binging, when we heal that restrict binge cycle, and we really start to heal our relationship with food and neutralize food in a way that doesn't have so much emotional weight to it, then it makes it a little bit easier to move into the body image work. Now, it's not compartmentalized. We usually do body image work as we're healing our relationship with food, but we can really dig deep into it once we've started to create a stronger foundation around the way that we are eating, and it doesn't feel so chaotic. When we try to do both at one time, it starts to feel just like a big tangly mess. So
Mm.
really calming down, I call it like the drama around food, just calming down the drama, really doing that part of the healing first, subtly, simultaneously with some of the body image, and then diving into that. And by that point, that's when we can really have those conversations around the fantasies that are coming up, the grief that we need to experience through uh, grieving grieving the body that you
Yeah.
want, that you don't have, grieving the thin ideal. It's a very important part of the process. Really unpacking why that's an ideal in the first place. One of my favorite things to do with clients is we always go through a body image timeline and really get to the heart of their story with their bodies and what were the pillars in their stories that um, really created this relationship with the body that they have now and this impression on the body that they are desiring. So yeah, again, like it's multifaceted, and it's a lot of layers.
Yeah. Yeah. So I can't help but the whole time you're talking be wondering if if almost wondering such like the little girl inside me is like is going, so is it okay that I might still want to lose weight? Like I don't know how to reconcile it, and that's to me just evidence that I have a lot of work to do, but I'm like, okay, I'm going to do all this healing and then I still might want to be thinner, or I guess me, and then I'm going, well, it's kind of the point that you hopefully wouldn't have that feeling. Like I don't know, I probably sound so just ignorant and naive to you right now. I'm part of the problem in that
Oh my
statement, but I just
No, not at all. Not at all. I think it's so normal to have the feeling that you are describing. And the truth of the matter is, even though you've gone through the healing process of healing your relationship with food and your body, you're still living in diet culture.
yeah,
It is
right. I got
still
to walk
everywhere
out the
all
front
around you.
door. Yeah,
You're,
yeah.
you've got to walk out the front door, and you're not immune from these triggers and these desires and
Right.
things that come up. Like, you're living in a society that's telling you that your body should be one way
Yeah.
in order to be successful in
Yeah.
this society. And that takes a lot of work to build resilience around. And again, what we were talking about earlier in the conversation, deciding for yourself this unshakable confidence and authenticity and appreciation for your body as is. You know, I always say, what is, not what if. Like,
Mm,
what if my body changes? Well, it is what it is right here, right now. And
yeah.
spoiler alert, it is going to change. Our body changes every single day.
Yeah.
But in terms of this weight loss desire that you're talking about, the the extreme desire that you're expressing right now,
Mm-hmm.
in my experience, it's the volume really dials down on that through the healing process. Does that mean it goes away altogether? Not
Mm.
necessarily. Everybody's journey is different, but you also live in this culture that is telling you to be one way.
Yeah.
And so it it might come up from time to time. It might feel more triggering sometimes than others, but that's where the self-compassion work is so important. The body neutrality work is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and really just the tools that are in your toolkit at that during those really tough body image days, and um, the environment that you're really creating for yourself in what you're able to control.
Yeah.
Who you're following, what you're watching,
Mm.
what you're reading, and actually just being more attuned to diet culture is really helpful too. Like, really being able to call BS on things versus just being exposed and taking in things without having that level of awareness of what is really impacting your relationship with food and body, that's really empowering too.
Yeah. Yeah, I've said this
So
before.
you're normal.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're human.
Yes, I was literally just about to say that. I've said this in other conversations where with my therapist, she's often reminding me that, she's not there to help me not feel. It's how we process the feelings, and you want to feel
Mhm.
everything. And Chrissy, you're human. You're going to feel, because there's literally sometimes I'll come to her and be like, okay, this is what's going on. Just how do I not care about this anymore? She's like, clearly you care. So let's talk about it, whether it's weight or a situation in my relationships or whatever. But I want to ask you one more question. You've said about, removing the drama from the food, and we've talked about food story. Is there a difference between, in your mind, someone who might be hyper focused on the drama of food versus hyper focused on sort of their, like, weight? Is there a difference between food focus and weight focus? They're just too intertwined. I don't know.
Yeah, I think no. I mean, everybody's lived experience is different, and so I think that it absolutely can exist in different ways, and also, um, it does correlate a lot of the times, but that doesn't mean that it can't, like, those concerns and that relationship
Mm,
can't exist in an isolated study as well too.
yeah.
Normally they go hand in hand together though, because you're putting food in your body. We have to eat, and also our body is susceptible for most of us, depending on our genetics, to changing based on what we're eating
Right.
for to a certain extent. But genetics play a significant role in all of this too, which is why health
Mm,
at every size is so important.
yeah.
But from a psychology standpoint with this, it's hard to untangle the two a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So just because of the beliefs that have been formed there and whatnot.
Mm. Oh my goodness. Okay. I'm certain I could keep you for another 6 hours. I mean, it goes on and on, but I appreciate you coming on and doing this with me. It kind of turned into a little therapy session for me. But Katelyn, is there anything, any final thought from you, anything you really want people listening to take away from our conversation, or any just really want to drive home any particular point?
Mm, well, I've loved this conversation. This has just been such a nourishing space, and you're fabulous. I just love talking to you.
Thank
And
you.
for everybody who, yeah, for everybody who's listening, just be kind to yourself, and also take action. Don't wait. Like,
Mm,
if you know in your bones that something needs to change, the biggest question that you can ask yourself is, what am I waiting on? What am I sacrificing
yes.
because I'm not making this change right now? Because I'm not healing? What in my life right now? What potentially down the line am I sacrificing by not addressing this?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's a really confronting question, but it's a really important question.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and
I love
and
that.
I just, I'm giving everyone a big, big, big hug. I know this was a heavy conversation that we just had, and so please honor your feelings that are coming up right now. If you're feeling triggered, or if you're feeling emotional, or if you're feeling, any of the things, it is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And just take some deep breaths, and yeah, sending everyone lots of love through this too.
Well, thank you. I'm doing all the breaths right now, so you feel like
But yeah,
you're
I'm
just
a big
talking
fan of.
to me. So, oh well, Katelyn, again, thank you so much. This was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you so much. This was just great. I appreciate you.
Lots to unpack here. Am I right? I so appreciate Katelyn's vulnerability in sharing her story. I can only imagine what a phenomenal coach she is when in just over an hour, she helped me discover an initial pillar of my own food story. I'm referring to my realization about being a young gymnast already comparing my body to the bodies around me. Could you relate to our dancer, gymnast, swimmer situations? I hadn't thought about that in years, and I can guarantee that if I have, I didn't place much importance on it. I mentioned in the intro that this conversation was about awareness for me. You can hear me processing in real time, for the first time, that intuitive eating is actually a science-based process, not just a phrase people like to say. I honestly didn't realize that intuitive eating was different from eating intuitively and that it was based on a book. And guess what? That book you can buy. I could buy. Anyone can buy. I have since purchased this book and the workbook. I'll link it for you in the show notes if you're interested. And it's eye-opening. This topic is so relevant for me right now that I can make this outro an entire episode. But I think what I will say in order to not do that is reiterate Katelyn's point. We each have to do our own inner work in order to change society. You don't have to have a quote-unquote issue with food or body image in order to acknowledge that you do have a relationship with food. You do have a relationship with exercise and your body. So if you've never thought about your food pillars, your relationship with food, your relationship with diet culture, exercise, your body image, take some time to dig deep into the archives. Start to ask yourself, when did I first notice my body? How did I feel about it? What happened that made me notice? How do I feel about food? Do I ever mentally or physically restrict my eating? What foods do I love? What foods do I eat because I think I have to? There's so many questions you can start to ask yourself. And you know what? Honestly, go follow Katelyn and listen to her podcast because I am not the expert here. I am you. I am on the journey. And Katelyn is as warm of a human being as you can get. Even in our initial emails when I pitched her for the show and I shared a little bit about my interest in talking with her, her first response was to cheer me on. She said, and I quote, "I'm sending you a tremendous amount of compassion for your own body image journey. I'm so glad to hear that you have the support of a therapist and always like to remind people that you are so not alone. Even sharing a glimpse of your own story in this email is a sign of so much strength and commitment to healing on your end. Incredibly inspiring." Thank you. And so, Katelyn, you rock, and I thank you so much again for your time and expertise. And I, of course, thank you for listening. Go check her out. Get on this journey with me. It's going to be worth it. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.